What's going on, everyone? Let me tell you about something that came up on NBA Today this afternoon that has the entire Knicks fan base experiencing a weird mixture of excitement about the potential and anxiety about the injury history involved. I'm talking about the kind of trade speculation that involves acquiring a player with absolutely elite defensive capability when healthy, but comes with the type of medical red flag that would make any front office hesitate before pulling the trigger. This isn't just about adding another body to the rotation or finding a backup center to spell Mitchell Robinson. This is about potentially bringing in one of the most gifted rim protectors in the entire NBA who could completely transform the Knicks' defensive identity if he can actually stay on the court. So buckle up, because what I'm about to share from today's ESPN broadcast isn't just about one player potentially changing teams. It's about risk versus reward in roster construction, about whether the Knicks should prioritize ceiling or floor when making moves, about injury insurance and depth strategies, and about what it takes to build a championship defense in today's NBA. Knicks faithful, I need you right now. This content doesn't reach the fans who need it without your help. That like button is how we grow, how we build, how we make this the home for Knicks fans on YouTube. One click, 1 second, changes everything. If you bleed orange and blue and you love this content, prove it right now. Smash that like button. Let's build this together. Once a Knick, always a Knick. All right, here's the situation that had the entire NBA Today panel absolutely split this afternoon. And I'm talking about veteran basketball analysts who've seen countless injury-prone players flame out. But also remember when healthy Robert Williams III was one of the most impactful defensive centers in basketball. The main story that emerged wasn't actually breaking news about an imminent trade, but rather part of a broader discussion about the Knicks' championship aspirations after their impressive NBA Cup quarterfinal victory over the Bucks, and what moves they still need to make to truly compete with the elite teams in the Eastern Conference. When the ESPN crew started analyzing the Knicks' defensive weaknesses and what they're still missing despite their recent success, Robert Williams III's name kept coming up repeatedly as the type of player who could address multiple needs simultaneously if the injury concerns could be managed. Let me start by giving you the full context that NBA Today was establishing right at the beginning of the broadcast, because understanding both the Knicks' current roster situation and Williams' circumstances in Portland is absolutely essential for grasping why this potential trade keeps generating buzz. The Knicks lost Isaiah Hartenstein in free agency, and that departure created a significant void at the center position in terms of rim protection and defensive versatility. Mitchell Robinson is talented when healthy, but has his own injury history that's concerning. And the organization learned the hard way last season that you cannot count on Robinson being available for 70-plus games. The ESPN panel was discussing how the Knicks desperately need insurance at that position, someone who can step in and provide elite defense if Robinson goes down, or even potentially start alongside him in certain matchups. But here's what really got the NBA Today analysts engaged about the Robert Williams possibility, and this is where you see both the upside and the risk factors coming into sharp focus. When Williams is healthy, he's spectacular defensively. We're talking about a player with career averages that put him among the league leaders in blocks and rebounds per 36 minutes. Someone with a massive wingspan and explosive athleticism that makes him a legitimate difference maker protecting the rim. The ESPN crew was showing highlights of Williams in his prime with Boston, just absolutely erasing shots at the basket, switching onto guards on the perimeter and staying with them, finishing lobs on the offensive end, doing all the things that make him such a valuable two-way center. The analysts were pointing out that if the Knicks could get that version of Williams, even for 50-60 games, it would be a massive upgrade. The show dove deep into why the Knicks specifically need someone with Williams' defensive profile and how he'd fit into Tom Thibodeau's system, and here's where the basketball fit becomes really compelling despite all the injury concern. The Knicks are going to face Joel Embiid multiple times in the playoffs. If they want to make a deep run, they're going to have to deal with Giannis Antetokounmpo, who just torched them, even in a losing effort. They need someone who can credibly defend those dominant interior scorers without getting completely overwhelmed. Williams has the size, length, and athletic ability to at least make those matchups competitive, to force those guys into tougher shots, to provide the kind of rim protection that allows the perimeter defenders to be more aggressive. The NBA Today panel was discussing how Williams' ability to protect the rim at an elite level would completely change the defensive calculus for the Knicks. What the ESPN crew kept emphasizing, and I think this is absolutely critical for understanding why this trade makes sense from the Knicks' perspective, is the insurance policy concept of having two talented centers who both have injury histories. The analysts were making the argument that if you have Mitchell Robinson, who might miss 20-25 games per season, and Robert Williams, who might miss 20-30 games per season, there's a decent chance that at least one of them is healthy at any given time, which means you're never completely without a quality rim protector. It's the same logic that led teams to acquire multiple injury-prone players at the same position, betting that the odds of them all being hurt simultaneously are relatively low. The NBA Today crew was debating whether that's sound roster construction or just doubling down on risk. The panel spent extensive time analyzing Portland's motivations for potentially moving Williams and why the Trail Blazers might finally be ready to trade him after previously being reluctant. And this sparked really interesting discussions about asset management and organizational timeline. Portland is clearly in rebuild mode. They have DeAndre Ayton, who's their starting center going forward. They drafted Donovan Clingan in the most recent draft and want to develop him. They have Duop Reith as depth, so Williams has basically become redundant in their front court rotation. The ESPN analysts were discussing how Williams' injury history has completely tanked his trade value, how the Blazers know that if he suffers another significant knee injury, his value goes to basically zero, so there's motivation to move him now, while they can still get something back, rather than risk losing him for nothing. What I found particularly fascinating during today's NBA Today discussion was when they started breaking down the financial aspects of a potential Williams trade and why his contract actually makes this feasible for the Knicks. Williams is making approximately $13 million in the final year of his deal, which is actually pretty reasonable for a player of his caliber when healthy and fits comfortably within the Knicks' salary cap structure. The analysts were suggesting that the Knicks could potentially package someone like Precious Achiuwa, who's been disappointing this season, plus maybe a couple of second-round picks, and that might be enough to get Portland to say yes, given their circumstance. The ESPN crew is going through various trade frameworks showing how the money could work without the Knicks having to gut their rotation or give up any significant future asset. The show also explored the counterargument about why acquiring Williams might be a mistake and why the Knicks should avoid players with serious injury red flags. And honestly, this was one of the more compelling parts of the entire segment. Some analysts argued that Williams has missed the majority of games over the last few seasons due to knee problems, that knee injuries for big men are notoriously difficult to fully recover from, that the Knicks would be better served targeting someone with a cleaner medical history, even if they're not quite as talented. The debate centered around whether it's worth gambling on Williams' upside versus playing it safe and acquiring a more durable but less impactful player. The ESPN panel was genuinely split on this question with valid points on both sides. What really struck me during the ESPN analysis was when they started connecting this potential Williams acquisition to the Knicks' recent NBA Cup victory over the Bucks, and what it revealed about their remaining weaknesses. The analysts were breaking down how Giannis Antetokounmpo still got basically whatever he wanted in the paint, despite the Knicks winning, how Milwaukee shot 44% from three, which exposed the Knicks' perimeter defense issue, how New York had to rely on offensive rebounding and getting to the free throw line to overcome their defensive shortcoming. The point was made that adding Williams wouldn't solve all those problems, that the Knicks still need to improve their three-point defense regardless of who's protecting the rim, but that having an elite shot blocker would at least address one of their major vulnerabilities. The panel also spent significant time discussing the Jalen Brunson MVP conversation that's been heating up, and how acquiring defensive pieces like Williams would actually help Brunson's case, and this was a really interesting angle. The NBA Today crew was praising Brunson's performance against the Bucks, where he scored 37 points and completely took over in the third quarter, discussing how he's playing at a genuine superstar level this season and deserves to be an MVP discussion. But they also pointed out that MVP voters traditionally reward players on teams with elite defenses, and the Knicks' defensive rating isn't quite where it needs to be to support an MVP candidacy. Adding Williams could help push the Knicks into that top 5 defensive rating territory, which would strengthen Brunson's resume significantly. One aspect that got really interesting discussion was the emergence of role players like Josh Hart and Tyler Kolek, and whether the Knicks should prioritize internal development over external acquisitions. The ESPN analysts were raving about Hart's performance as a starter against Milwaukee, his 19 points and 15 rebounds and 7 assists, how he's playing some of the best basketball of his career in this expanded role. They discussed Kolek's defensive improvement and how he's finally showing why the Knicks were so high on him as a backup point guard. The question was raised whether the Knicks should just ride with what they have and trust their internal options rather than making trades that might disrupt chemistry, or if they need to be more aggressive about adding talent regardless of how well the current roster is playing. Listen, after watching the entire NBA Today segment this afternoon about Robert Williams III potentially being available and how he'd fit with the Knicks' championship aspirations, I'm absolutely torn about whether this is the right move to make. On one hand, Williams, when healthy, is exactly the type of rim protector the Knicks desperately need, someone who can credibly defend Embiid and Giannis, someone who would give them elite defensive versatility and insurance for Mitchell Robinson's inevitable injury. On the other hand, the injury history is legitimately scary, and there's a very real possibility that Williams gets hurt again and provides almost no value while taking up a roster spot and salary. If I'm Leon Rose and the front office, I think you have to do your due diligence on Williams' medical records. You have to talk to doctors and get their honest assessment of his long-term health prospects, and then you make a calculated decision based on the acquisition cost. If Portland is willing to take Precious Achiuwa and a couple of second-rounders, you absolutely take that gamble on Williams' upside because the potential reward is worth the relatively modest risk. But if they're demanding significant assets, you walk away and find another solution to your rim protection need.